Welcome to Factly, the place of interesting and unusual facts. Top 10 interesting facts about polar bears. In the bitterly cold Arctic, polar bears live on the sea ice and along coastlines. Except for pregnant females, many polar bears venture out onto the ice to hunt for seals when the sea ice forms over the ocean in cold weather. Polar bears swim in the coastal waters of the Arctic and roam its ice sheets. They have huge, slightly webbed front paws that they use to paddle, and they are exceptionally good swimmers. Polar bears have been observed swimming hundreds of miles from the coast, but they'll most likely float on sheets of ice for most of the journey. Let's jump right into the video with number 1. Polar bear paws have no-slip treads. The Arctic environment is perfectly suited to the polar bear's lifestyle. Their paws can be the size of dinner plates, measuring up to almost 12 inches across their widest point. Warmth is provided by tufts of fur that are located between their foot pads and their toes. Papillae are the tiny, fleshy lumps that cover the foot pads on the bottom of each paw. These foot pads are black in color. The bear's papillae provide traction on the ice and prevent it from sliding away. The huge paws of the polar bear are beneficial to the animal when it comes to swimming as well. The forepaws function similarly to paddles, while the rear paws operate as rudders. Number 2. Polar bear cubs are born in dens hidden under the snow. A pregnant female polar bear will dig a den in the fall after having fed all winter and during the spring seal pupping season. This is where she will give birth to her cubs and nurse them for the first few months of their lives. After she has finished digging the den, she sits and waits for the snow to fall so it can cover the entrance tunnel and hide it from view. The mother bear and her cubs will emerge from their den in the spring, and then they will travel to the sea ice to begin hunting seals. This incredible effort will require the mother bear to go without food for up to 8 months. Number 3. Polar bears are the largest four-legged predators on Earth. Males in adulthood typically weigh between 350 and 600 kilos. That is up to 1,300 pounds. Adult females typically weigh between 150 and 290 kilos, reflecting their lower size. So we can look at the female as being around 330 to 650 pounds. When measuring the height of a bear, scientists typically measure them from the shoulder when they are standing on all fours. Adult polar bears typically reach heights between 3.5 and 5 feet tall at their shoulders. When standing on its hind legs, however, an adult male can reach heights of more than 10 feet tall. That is incredible. Number 4. For a polar bear, home is on that sea ice. You see, polar bears don't just love the ice, they are dependent on that sea ice of the Arctic for their survival, an environment that is rapidly disappearing due to the warming of the Earth. They do all the things on the ice, including hunt seals, breed their young, move about, and occasionally even den. Polar bears are found in all 5 polar bear nations of the Arctic circumpolar region, which are Canada, the United States, which is basically Alaska, Russia, Norway, and Denmark. The majority of the world's polar bears live in Canada, which is home to nearly 2/3 of the total population. Also, just so you know, you won't actually find any polar bears in Antarctica. Penguins, though. Number 5. Polar bear cubs grow fast. The cubs typically only weigh between 1 and 1.5 pounds when born, but they grow to more than 20 times their body weight in just a few months. When a family of polar bears eventually makes its way into the sea ice in early spring, the cubs may already weigh anywhere from 15 to 30 pounds, despite being only 2 to 3 months old. When the cubs are born, the polar bear's milk has around 31% more fat than any other milk found on land. This gives an enough amount of calories, which assists in the cub's quick growth. Number 6. Polar bears are incredible travelers. Polar bears are very mobile animals, ranking in the top of the list for the four-legged mammals in terms of mobility. They're capable of covering more than 3,000 kilometers in a single month and have home ranges that are more than 600,000 square kilometers. That is an area larger than the state of California or the Yukon. During the fall, a seal will use its sharp claws on its foreflippers to carve 10 to 15 breathing holes in the ice. These holes are known as the igloos. Even on ice that is up to 2 meters thick, seals are able to keep their breathing holes open all winter long. This becomes the ideal hunting ground for our polar bear friends. Number 7. Polar bears are at the top of the Arctic food chain, but they need the entire food web in order to stay alive. 86% of the carbon that makes up a polar bear's body is generated from the marine algae that grows within sea ice. This is an important source of food for polar bears. The algae are consumed by microorganisms like the copepods, which are then consumed by fish. Fish are then consumed by seals, which are then consumed by polar bears. In the same way that soil and plants make up the foundation of the food chain in a forest or a meadow, sea ice and algae make up the foundation of the food chain on that sea ice, with polar bears serving as the top predator. This also makes polar bears considered to be a keystone species in their ecosystem. Now, what happens to an ecosystem when the top predator is eliminated? Well, the population is preyed upon explodes when it is no longer controlled, placing enormous strain on the creatures further down the food chain. And so it continues, right? In reality, as Robert Payne, the scientist who introduced the idea of keystone species in the 1960s, discovered, it's a little bit more difficult than that. A complex ecosystem depends on certain organisms to preserve diversity and balance, and when they are gone, everything changes, not just for the next species up the food chain. In essence, keystone species play a crucial role in the ecosystems they are a part of, ensuring the survival of many other species. Without them, the entire ecosystem would change significantly or even vanish. That brings me to number 8. Polar bears can eat over 100 pounds of blubber in one sitting. They are a species of bear that consumes the most meat overall. Because marine fat, also known as blubber, is the primary source of fuel for these animals, scientists frequently refer to them as lipivores. Polar bears don't digest carbohydrates or proteins as well as brown bears do. Therefore, the majority of the fat they consume is absorbed directly into their own body rather than be converted into energy. Instead, a majority of their caloric intake comes from prey consisting of seals that are hunted on the sea ice. That fat from the seals allows them to stay alive for a significant portion of the year, as well as during periods of prolonged starvation. Number 9. Polar bears sometimes hoard food. A recent scientific research team described the catching habit of some polar bears, which included burying their carcasses and guarding them while they are buried. However, this behavior is not very common. The research found that just 19 out of thousands of individual polar bears monitored over the course of 45 years exhibited the behavior of food storage. In contrast to the widespread practice that food storage was among grizzlies, it happens among polar bears as well. They showed that the size of the prey that was killed, the amount of the kill that was left over after the bear had already eaten its fill, and the amount of snow that was on the ice around the kill are all elements that can influence a polar bear's decision to hide its food. The authors also entertained the possibility that bears with a lower body mass would be more likely to save food for later use. Number 10. Polar bears are a vulnerable species. Sea ice is necessary for polar bears to hunt, procreate, travel, and occasionally build dens. But because of human-caused climate change, the Arctic is warming and the ice is disappearing. Longer ice-free seasons and longer fasting times have already contributed to a reduction of some polar bear populations in some areas of the Arctic. The loss of sea ice due to climate change is the single biggest threat to the survival of polar bears, according to the IUCN Polar Bear Specialist Group. There are, according to the IUCN, approximately 26,000 polar bears around the globe. But if nothing is done about climate change, by the end of the century, all but a few polar bear populations may be extinct. Along with the effects of climate change, polar bears face additional difficulties such as increased commercial activity, human-bear conflicts, pollution, disease, inadequate habitat protection, like for dens and seasonal resting areas, plus the possibility of overharvesting in smaller or declining populations. Well, I hope you've enjoyed these cool facts about the marvelous polar bear. If you enjoyed this information, hit the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video.